Welcome to the first video of a set of tutorials. I'm doing these tutorials for a lent course. Normally I give up something like chocolate or some material, but this time I chose to pursue my lent by giving up my time to give people my knowledge, my treasure. By doing this, you'll learn all the professional knowledge that I hold as a 3D artist. At first, we're going to take this course lightly, so it's going to be the beginners, how the software works and how to do stuff, how to use stuff, and then later on we'll do into more advanced stuff. So at the start of the course we'll be creating like a salt dispenser. I'm creating it for like a restaurant kind of scene, so it's ideal, it's simple, it's a cylinder, so it's easy to do. And then later on in the course we'll be doing more complex, advanced 3D models like a food mixer. Now by the end of the course you'll be able to do models like this. This is like a cola can. It uses like a physically based rendering. Now later on in the course I will explain to you what that means and all the terminology that I'm telling you now. So don't panic. Also, if you want examples of my work, please go to my website at www.andrewbooth.3d.com. And as you can see, these are all my assets. It's like an asset library. All the content shows you all the models that I've done in the past. And once you become advanced enough, you'll be able to create some of these kind of assets that you see before you. So let's start. In Maya, when you first open the package, it looks very daunting. It looks very busy and all sorts. Bearing in mind, this is not just created for games or tutorials or movies. It's also created for animation, all sorts. So it's very, very diverse, which means a lot of tools is in there. A lot of this stuff you will not use, so don't panic. Don't panic, because a lot of this you won't even touch. To be honest, I haven't touched any of these. Mostly tools you use is like the Polygon kind of tools here, modeling setting, and all these settings here. So next, ideally you need to set up a new project in the project window. The reason being you do this is because when you go in the industry, when you get a lot of assets, it becomes quite messy quite quickly, and you need to sort through a lot of the stuff, and it's just bad practice. So ideally you need an ideal kind of folder structure which is broken down as you see before yourself. You don't need to touch any of these naming conventions because it's exactly what it's what's on the tin. So you click new. For the project name, you call it appropriate name and appropriate name. This is where you name your project using a conventional name. It's ideal to have a conventional name for all your projects, all your assets and everything, because it's easy to find. You pass it to an artist and they'll be, 3D artist, they'll be able to say, hey, here's the asset, look for it, and they can find it and pick up quite quickly. Since I'm working on a salt dispenser, just call it salt dispenser. Now ideally, when you create a project, it's better to create a new location. Doing this, it'll prompt, be able to find an asset when it's needed quite quickly. It's quite simple. I normally save mine on a desktop because it's easy to access, and only thing it does is mess up my desktop, which I don't mind because it's my personal computer, it's my preference. But most industry computers and companies will have a structure and where to save stuff, name a convention, so just bear that in mind, keep that in mind. So not everything's the same. I'm saving this project in the documents. It's ideal to do that because in my documents, because it's easy to access, and since it's these projects I'm doing, it's quite better to do it that way. So you select and then accept. Oh yeah, the reason that came up is because I already have a folder that's named Salt Dispenser. When you have that, when you come to that error, that's because you already got two of the same folders and it get confused and it can't name it. So I'm going to cancel that. I thought another way to do it when you already have a folder is to set project and Salt Dispenser that way. And as you can see, my name's already come up. And you set it. By setting the project, all your folders and the pathway automatically turns to that folder. So all the files that you save, all your maps that you output will be saved in the appropriate folder in the correct place and the correct folder pathway. So when I go to save as, automatically it comes to my scenes page. Now I already previously saved a folder known as Salt 000. We've been doing that. It's the preset. So if you made in the future a mistake and you need to go back to the beginning, it's good to have it as a setup. So we're now going to set up the scene ready for modeling. To do this, you first of all need like a scaler. I call it a scaler. It's when you import a human body from Modbox. It's like a temporary one. Modbox in itself, its preset human body is scaled to an average human being. So by importing that into the scene, it is useful to gauge how big your asset in the 3D space is in comparison to that human body. So to do this, you go into Modbox. I already got mine loaded up. Just when you load yours up, just load up the human body, which this is, and then you select the model, and then file, export selection. Now obviously we haven't set our project so it's going to your default. Just simply find your folder and save the FBX into your scenes folder, right there, and keep it as body temp. Save it as an FBX. An FBX is like an all disk open folder, file. It could be seen by a lot of programs. Mayor can see it, Modbox can open it, and it's the default mesh and file that Games Engine use, like Unreal Engine 4 uses it. That's how you import. It's very important to have it as an SBX. It's easy to open up in the report. So save it. Then you can close it. You can close Modbox once you've done that. I'll ask you to save, but you don't want to save because you've done nothing to the models. So just save if it doesn't freeze us. Alright, next you import it into the actual scene. So import, and as you can see, body temp FBX. Import. Now, as you can see, the model has come out massive. To see it in the whole screen, just press F, and it automatically zooms out into the actual size of the model. This is the correct reference to real world. So every asset and every object you create, you model it around him, so it'll be correct. Obviously, depending on the object, depends on the size. So you do research, and the key is reference. Reference everything that you do. If you want to create like the salt dispenser, we'll be going through that. We'll be researching that on Google, the average size of a salt dispenser. I mean, and salt dispensers in itself is quite open because it could be any size. It's self-explanatory, you know, it could be any size. So that you don't need to worry about. But most objects, when you're doing the scene, do size it, do scale it to the appropriate size. I mean, you don't want like a car, a proper car modelled to be smaller than the person, because how can they fit into it? So it's ideally good to scale it and have this as a reference. Now, what I normally do when this is imported, I go layers, create layer from selected. As you can see, it's called layer 1. Just rename it by double clicking it and calling it scalar. You can change it to its actual wireframe color, a particular color, and since it's a reference, click reference. This is so now that you can't click on it, it can't be edited. It can be changed, so you can do that and it can be click. R means reference. Now P. 3 means here is visual. Bear that in mind. Okay, because sometimes you will need to turn it on and off regardless of what you're doing, because sometimes it can be a nightmare. Another thing to watch, normally I display my my mesh details of the entire scene. This will change depending on how many objects we have in there. You'll see this one will change depending on the size of the environment, and this will change depending on the selection. As you can see, it's gone back to 0 because there's nothing selected. What companies look out for is tries or faces. These are polygons. They mostly go by tries. The more polygons, the bigger the file size, the bigger it costs when it's imported into games engine. This is important because certain games engine only have limitations on how many polygons you can import per object. So depending on each one, you know, be efficient when it comes to typology. Now, you just heard me use a terminology known as topology. I'll explain that in the later future videos. So don't worry, it is easy to understand and everything will be explained. Next thing you noticed is the grid down here. I normally switch my grid off, but when you first start a scene and you see it, it's a quick indication on the units you're using. Now this is quite important because when you're working in certain objects, your scene needs to be set up for specific measuring units. You go this by clicking you'll be clicking the button, which I haven't got on display here. So if you haven't got on display, you just go window, display, sorry, I do apologise. And click on this range slider. It'll bring up this slider. This is basically used for animation purposes. When you have an effect and animations and particle systems, it will be using this. So don't take notice at the time scale at the moment in time. If you're doing animation, that's when you need to concern of it. But the reason we need to click it is because it includes this button here, which automatically opens the Mayor's preferences. This is ideal because everything, all the settings are in here. So you just simply click on settings, and this is all the units, working units. At the moment I'm set as centimeters, so meaning that every 1 square of this grid is a centimeter. That means across that side it's 20 units, 20, 20, so on and so forth. Now, depending on the object you modelling, depends on what you need to use. If you modelling like a scene, like a building, you'll scale it to foot and yard, or even meters, depending on your preference. But for more small objects, it's ideal to use either centimeter or an inch. I normally work in inch. I'm a person of craft, so I use a lot of inches, especially when I'm doing like craft kind of work, so it's ideal for me. Less frames per second is more to animation, so a lot of this you don't need to concern yourself. And then click save. As you can notice, as soon as you click that button, the grid changed. It's slightly bigger, which is good. Which means that every square, 1 square equals an inch. 1 single inch. Now, as you can see, it's good. It's good relating to the actual scaler. As you can see, it's perfect when you design like small objects like a table, because you can work, say, that's about 10 inches there. So it's quite quick to work around. I normally turn the grid off by clicking that button there. Turns off the grid. For me, it distracts me. It distracts me because it's like loads of lines and it's not necessary. I can work without it, but some people, their preference is to have like the grid up. That's the first part of the setup complete. Next thing to do is the actual background. At this moment in time, the default is grey, or when you open yours up, it will probably be gradient. You can change that through your settings, but when you render out, it'll be black. It will be black. See, black. It's black background. That's because that's in the actual camera settings. And as you can see, it's not good for previewing. It's too dark. You can't determine the back of the model to when the model finishes, when it goes into shadow or anything like that, which is what is needed. A lot of this work is used in open space, so that is ideal. It needs to be changed. It needs to be changed. To do this, you go to camera settings and you scroll down till you get to environment. As you can see, it's set to black. I just lighten up to about there, roughly about there. This means whenever the video is rendered, the background will be that colour. So when you render out again, it's much more lighter, it's much more deformed. You can see what is going on in the actual model, which is good. As you can see, that's ideal. Now normally what I do, I save it at this point, because now whenever you start your projects, every time you start up and you open that salt 000, it will default to this, which is ideal. It means you don't have to reset all your settings or anything like that, and you can just click and start modeling. Now I'll now explain to you what this program is really about and the theory behind it. Let me come into Photoshop. I'll go into Photoshop and I'll write down all the information in a sec. When you click on the model, let's create a simple primitive cube. As you see, it's come out small. That is 1 inch by 1 inch. When you go into Polycube, it says 1 by 1. To see it, just increase these presets. And focus on it. Actually, this is just a basic cube. Now, when you click on this cube, when you right click this cube, this menu pops up. You have terminology referring to edge, face, sorry about that, I can't get my words out. Vertex, and then UV. I'll explain to you what UV means. Now, all this terminology refers to space and the shape and how it corresponds to the actual space. When I'm referring to space, 3D space, it's this open space here. Just as it sounds, it is quite literally space, just like you imagine space out of Earth, out of space. Now, all this terminology is quite simple to understand. It refers to points in space. When you have a single dot in space, that is a single space and point. And when you're dealing with 3D space, that is quite literally a space within, in space. So all that is nothing, it goes on for infinite. But that dot is an infinite point in space. That is referred to a vertex. Now when you have two dots in space and they're connected by a line, that line is still infinite because there's nothing that defines on how far back it goes or anything like that. So 2 point, the vertex and the line is still infinite. But that line is referred to an edge. But when you have 3 or more edges and vertices connected together, it creates a trie. When that happens, this is automatically filled in. Mayer automatically determines that when these 3 points are connected in that manner, this is automatically a plane. That refers to a plane. And because of that, it determined that when these 3 points are connected in space, this is solid. Kind of like a floor on a planet. And Mayer automatically determines that that is solid. And it's not see-through and it's not infinite. Now that inside part of the try is referred to face. As you can see, when you go back to the mayor, and this cube has edge, vertex and face. The face referring to that single face, that solid ground. And when you click vertex, it clicks to that point there, which then you can move up, down, left, right. And then when you click edge, you're telling Maya that you're selecting that particular edge of that face. Now, when you move a face or a polygon or a point, a vertex, you're telling the Maya to move it that much upwards, that many steps upwards and sideways, and it's that what models the cube, deforming it and changing its shape. And that's the basic ideology of modeling. You're modeling a primitive shape to form another, to form a can, a food mixer, a spoon, a salt dispenser. All this is started from a preset that you modify. You modify the points in space, edge, and so on and so forth. Next thing you have, when you have a try, that's 3 points. But when you have 4 points, it creates a quad. A quad is better. It is more better for topology, because when it's a triangle, it's all to do with resolution, and when you deal with resolution and more resolution you have, more you cut up the squares. It's all about how much you can cut up evenly. When you're dealing with a quad, you can cut up it four times evenly, and it will always keep quite symmetrical. But when you deal with tries, it cannot be cut up so much, so easily. When you cut it in half that way, you'll still have 2 tries, and the same when you go to all the sides. And when you come to texturing, you will see pinching in the center when you cut it in that dimension. And ideally, it's better to have a quad. Now you probably think, okay, the more points, more better the polygon, better the actual model. No, that is true. When you have 5 or more, like this, a pentagon, which is a simple pentagon, it's referred to an n-gon. When you have an n-gon like that, it's bad practice, because it's not divided evenly, and it's putting pressure on all these points here for the actual texture, and you'll see a lot of deformities and stretching when it comes to texturing this main shape here. So that is a bad thing. Obviously, if you can't avoid it, and use them, but avoid them as best as you can. So remember all this when you modelling. Now, when it comes to modelling, it comes down to how your workflow, how you do it. Some people build upwards and scale downwards. In other words, they cut it up first into the many polygons they need. So, like, say they go to edit, mesh, and so it's mesh tools. So this is a new version of Maya, so they changed a lot of things around. Insert edge loop, you can add more edges and then manipulate the edges to your desire, to your reference and how the model would look. As you can see, just by moving certain points, you can easily change the shape of the cube. So now it looks less like a cube. And I can't even describe what it looks like, but that's one way of doing it. Or another way of doing it, if I create another cube, I can show you. Another way to go around modelling is by clicking on a face and then clicking extrude. As you can see, it creates new polygons and it extends from the face that you selected. Now, each workflow is not necessarily incorrect. It depends on your workflow and your preference to work. Some people prefer to start up with a cube, then cut up and manipulating the shapes and the edges and the vertices to the actual reference, to actually model what they want. And others prefer to extrude outwards and upwards and create geometry that way. It's no right or wrong way, but it's all down to personal preferences. Now, when it comes to a certain object, they can be edited quite simply in the viewport. When you click W, it's for move, so you can move objects this way and that way. It refers to X, Y and Z. The blue equals X, the green equals Y, and the red, well, here it's yellow, but normally it's red, it's actually X. It refers to X, Y, Z, like the points on a graph. That's the best way to describe it. Points in the graph. You go cross that way, X, upwards Y, and that's why it's said. All systems, all software use this principle, no matter if it's in a games engine, if it's in Maya, Substance Designer, all these software uses this principle. When you move an object, you tell Maya that you're moving that object that so many points in space that direction and that many points upwards. Now, this is referred to the rest of the tools. Like when you click E, it enables your rotate tool. So you tell the computer to rotate object back and forth, side to side, and so on and so forth, depend on its axis. And again, it refers to the X, Y, Z axis. And when you click R, it goes to the scale. You can scale it up and down evenly by clicking the yellow cube, and as you can see it does it evenly, but you can also deform it to your preference by the X, Y and Z directions depending on your model. And all this does not just refer to the object itself. You can manipulate 30s, so you can change it like this and really mold the object to your desire, dependent on your reference and what you're modeling, your asset. Another thing I want you to take note, it's ideal to have this screen up. The 4 screens, orthographic view it's called. It refers to the top, front, side and perspective. It's ideal to do this so you can line things up to how you require them, and all this is ideal. So the next thing, it's good to match up and line up objects if you're doing certain assets, multiple assets as seen, when you want to place it in the world. Also, when you're modeling, it's better to do this to line things up, as I say, but to unwrap and all the rest of it when you're dealing with the project. Some people don't. I prefer just working in a perspective. It's not ideal, but I prefer it because I can actually see what I'm doing in a 3D space. I can manipulate it freely, but that's down to personal preference. And I think that will sum up today's lesson. And to sum up, Maya is a big program. It's massive, and you can never say you're a true master because you always will learn new things. So next week we'll be discussing how to model in more in depth. We'll start off the project, a cube, a cylinder, and working into a salt dispenser. So join me tomorrow, and hopefully you'll learn some more. You'll learn so much more for the 3D world. Thank you for watching.